Hello everyone, this is the great Lord and Master, Osiron, the Eternal, for what is going to be another presentation of the true tree of life and the jewel of creation, but this is going to be done in a little bit of a different way. And here's the board here. If you recall, this is from the previous video, the Yi Jing videos, and this is what triggered this line of thought. This little impromptu drawing here, where I put the true tree of life in the position of what it's really doing from our perspective. See the little human? This is the jewel. This is the jewel of creation. Well, this is what the true tree of life is doing from our perspective. Okay? And then, as you watched from that video, I noticed, based on this quick, crude drawing, that these two worlds here look like a pentagram surrounded by another pentagram. So it's showing its fiveness, and that is what triggered this line of thought. Now over here, what you're going to see is a differently drawn version of the true tree of life down below and the jewel of creation above. And the irony is, all this time I've been talking about the true tree of life and the jewel and all that, and the Kabbalists call their tree the tree of life. Well, the irony is that is actually the best name for what what their structure is a tree, because it is a tree. But in comparison to what the true tree of life is, the true tree of life would actually be more like the roots. And this is what you're seeing here. And you can also see, this is the first time I've presented them equally. So both structures are presented in equal size. Okay? And you can see with the true tree of life inverted, and now when you see the order of the elements, the proper order of elements of water, fire, air, and then Malkuth would be the earth. You're seeing the water below. And now with the jewel of creation, you're seeing what's going on with that. You see it starts with a 1, and now we have air up here, which is the head, and then we have water for the heart, and then we have fire for the sex. Okay? And everything's sort of meeting right in the middle ground here. As a matter of fact, I have videos on the Yggdrasil. And actually, this drawing here, which is basically just, this is the Osiron drawn version of the Tree of Life, where Daath is always filled in. This would actually be a better representation of the Tree of Life, because you have Midgard right in the middle, and that is where the 4 and the 5 are, and those are very key terrestrial numbers, as you'll see. So this drawing would actually be a better representation of Yggdrasil than even the one I've been using, because it has Midgard right in the middle. But over here, you're going to notice I have it drawn up in its pentagram shape. And this is going to offer, because the heart of the true tree is a 5. Okay, so the Tiphareth aspect of the true tree of life is a 5. In Golden Dawn presentations, the tarot especially, the 5s are demonized, like viciously. Every 5 tarot card in the pips of the tarot is a miserable, pathetic card. And even on the false tree of life, the Kabbalistic tree of life, the 5 is always painted in a vastly negative light, because 5 would be over here on the Pillar of Boaz, and it's always negative. They always talk bad about it. And I'm going to show today that 5 is one of the cornerstone building blocks that structure our material matrix. And we see that via the phi ratio. See, phonetics are important because the words we use are derived from older words. In 5, the number 5 sounds a lot like phi, and the 5 and the phi ratio go hand in hand, as we're going to see a little bit later. But when you look at this structure right here, these two structures, you should notice something right away, is that if you look at this, you're going to notice it's comprised of 4 pentagram structures. So you got a pentagram up above, you got another pentagram or pentagon here, then you got a pentagon here, and then you got a pentagon here. Okay? And then right in the heart of this structure you see the 4 and the 5. And on the Kabbalistic, or the Jewel of Creation, which is what this is, you see the 5-4 presentation. Okay? So right away we're seeing the relationship between the 4 and the 5 coming out in this without even looking at any of the number aspects. And now this is going to show some beauty, because one of the biggest postulations that I've been making is that the true tree of life and the Jewel of Creation used a single-digit code of 0 through 9 in the case of the true tree, but it uses 1 through 9 in the case of the Jewel of Creation, which is the material world. Remember that. The Jewel of Creation is only the physical world. It's the entire universe, it's our body, it's anything that's physical. It's the electrical matrix. Okay? And now, the number structures of the Sephiroth, and I'll use the Kabbalistic tree to prove this point, sort of to beat them over the head with their own mythology. What you're going to see here, now the Jewel of Creation is presented as the Kabbalistic tree would be, upright, but remember, this is just the body. And when you add the first 3 Sephiroth, 1, 2, and 3, that gives you a 6, okay? And then, keeping it separated in worlds again, if you add 9 to this 6, it gives you 15, which is what these 3 spheres add up to. And then if you add 9 to this 15, it gives you 24, which is what these 3 spheres add up to. So all over the place, the very structure of even the Kabbalistic tree is telling you that 9 is the root code, not 10. And it's the same thing down here with the true tree of life, which is now inverted, which could actually more accurately be called the root of life, or the roots of life. But now when you have 3, and you add 9 to that, it gives you 12, and this is what the fire element adds up to. Then when you add 9 to that again, it gives you 21, is what the air suits add up to. So this is doing the same exact thing as this. It's increments of 9 in each of the worlds. And down here, we're seeing something very, very important. We start out with 3. This is below the abyss. See, each presentation has its own version of the abyss, okay? On the root of creation, or the true tree of life, there's the water element, and here's the water below the abyss, and it's the same mirror image up for the Jewel of Creation, which is air up here. Okay, this would be the neck, and this would be the head, and this would be the heart, and this would be the sex. Okay, and then in the middle of these, you have the actual working aspects. And down here on the true tree of life, they're all the same polarity. Okay, so you got 2 masculine elements, fire and air, working in the visible or the operating masculine aspect of it. And up here, you have no polarity. They reverse, because you have the 2 masculine elements here, which are 2 masculine elements, but the numbers that are created from each of the worlds are polarized with a 1 and a 2, and then a 2 and a 1. Up here, it's the exact reverse. You're dealing with the 2 polarized elements of water and fire, but the numbers of the worlds are non-polarized with a 15, which is 2 feminine, and then 24, which is 2 masculine. They all give you 6, 6, 6. So it's all working in a integrated way. If one is polarized, its reverse is going to be seen non-polarized. And then when you jump up, it's the same exact thing in every fractal too, because what you're seeing here is a 3-6 presentation, and this is feminine, and this is 3, and this is all masculine, and this is 6. Well, it's the reverse up here. It starts out with a 6-3 presentation, but up here you got 6 masculine and air, which is masculine, but it's 3 Sephiroth. And down here you got the 3, and you have 6 Sephiroth. But then you have polarization of feminine and masculine, as I said again. Now, what's going to come next is going to be another example of beating the Kabbalists over the head with their own mythology. Okay, we've all heard. I've made videos about this number of 72. You've all heard of the 72 names of God and all that, which is a Jewish myth. Okay, well, what you're going to see when actually, I'll take a quick step backwards for a minute because this is important. What you're going to see in the operating sections of the pentagram in each of these worlds, the numbers that surround the heart, which is 5 of this, form 28. Okay, and then when you add the 5 of this, it becomes 33. Well, up here, what happens is the Sephiroth that ring 6, which is the Tiphareth of the jewel, the numbers that ring that 6 add up to 33. Okay, and then when you add that 6, it becomes 39. And as you know from the I Own the Tree of Life video, where I showed how the tarot keys form a 369 pattern using the tarot keys on the true Tree of Life, we're seeing the pillar of Boaz is 33, and the pillar of Yakin, the pillar of Yakin is 33, which is the 6th pillar, and the pillar of Boaz, before it's reduced, adds to 39, then reduces to 12, then 3. So we're seeing both of those pillars represented in the numbers of this. And down here, we're seeing the 33 and the 28. And that 28 is going to be a major important piece I'm going to get to in a minute. But getting back to the other point, when you add 39 and 33, that gives you 72 on this meeting line here. So we're sort of, beating the Kabbalists to death with their own mythology and the proper code of the tree structures. So when you add this working aspect and this working aspect, it gives you that 72 for a total number. Now, if you add every number, if you add the 3 here and the 6 here to that total 72, it gives you 81, which is the 9 times 9 Kundalini grid, 81. 8 and 1 is a very important number, as we've seen, but the Kundalini grid is comprised of 9 times 9, which is 81. And the same thing over here with the Osiron tree, which is, this is basically what this is. This is just in the video I made, the double cube of Lord Osiron, which I changed to the spiraling serpent of Lord Osiron. This is what this is, in just being presented in a pentagonal shape rather than a hexagonal shape. That's all it is. But both are valid. The hexagonal is valid and the pentagonal is valid. And the main point of this video is to illustrate that 5 is not a negative number. As a matter of fact, 5 is one of the most powerful numbers there is, and it should not be demonized. That's why 5 is the heart of the true tree, and 6 is the heart of the jewel. They both matter. And we see that in the Osiron Tarot Spiral too. House 9, which is Sagittarius, which I've said is the alleyway between worlds. It's the alleyway between the true tree world and the physical world is Sagittarius, House 9. And the cards that reside in there are 14, Temperance, and then Devil, and then 15, the Devil. And 14 reduces to a 5, and the Devil reduces to a 6. So we're seeing the 5-6 presentation in the house of Sagittarius, which is the 9th house, which is the alleyway between the living and which is the alleyway between the physical and the non-physical. Okay, and but this also, now let me get to the point of the 28, because this is very important. In the outer ring here, before you add that 5, it adds to 28. And in the previous video, this square comes from that previous video with the Yi Jing. As I pointed out in that video, when you take the 64 hexagrams and put them in their 8x8 grid, each layer of the grid, it starts out with 4 hexagrams in the middle, then the next row is 12, the next row after that is 20, and then the final row is 28. And that, of course, reduces to a 1. But there's a lot going on with this. It's very important. It links with this beautifully. See, in the middle, I said that the four hexagrams are the dead center of this ringed cube, this ringed square construct. But that's not really true. The dead center of it is actually 0, because when you go to the dead center of it, it is 0. And the first ring is just made out of 4 hexagrams, 4 square. You can say squares, because this is all squares. You don't even have to use hexagrams, because that might be confusing. We're just using blocks, like blocks of blocks of space. So it takes 4. So once you start with a 1, and then you double that 1 to 2, and then you double that 2 to 4, it takes you back to its starting symmetrical shape of a square. So it doesn't do that with the 2 or the 3, obviously, because it would be off balance. So it doesn't begin until 4 when it equalizes again. And what we're seeing with that is it goes from 0 state to 1, and then doubles to 2, and then doubles to 4. And that takes 4 steps to get to that 4. So we're seeing 4 rings, but that takes 4 steps to get to that first stabilizing 4. And then when you add 4, 2, and 1, that gives you 7. And we all know 7 is a very powerful number now. So it takes 4 steps to get to 4, and it begins in the center with 4, and then it rings out, and then it goes to 28. And we're seeing that here. The outer ring numbers on the true tree form 28, and in the middle is a 5. Well, we see that here with the 4 actual squares, but the dead center of the square is the 0 space, which, 0 is acknowledged as a 1 in the root code of the single digit code. That's why you put 0 here, because 0 becomes a 1, as I've explained millions of times by now. So we're seeing the true tree of life in the presentation of this, the presentation I used for the Yi-Jing square matrix. And now the beauty of that is, this is really amazing, the 5th ring, if you were to add a 5th square ring, the numbers of the blocks would reduce to 9, okay? And then it would count down from there, going 9, 8, 7, 5, 6, all the way through. It would start repeating in the 9 loop. Because every ring, as each ring expands, it grows by 8 blocks, okay? But now in the beginning it doesn't do that because you don't have 8 blocks. It doesn't start with 8 blocks. So in the beginning it starts out with 4, then it goes 3, 2, 1, and then it jumps to 9 on the 5th ring. Remember that, the 5th ring, and then it starts here, and then it will run through its progression. Now if you take this to a cube, this is only a 2D presentation, but if you take it to the cube, the frame of the cube will grow by 16 blocks with each progression, and it takes 8 blocks to form its nucleus of equal symmetry. So it would start with the same thing, 0, then it would go to 1, that 1 would become 2, that 2 would become 4, but it's still not, it's not symmetrical yet. It doesn't become symmetrical until it hits 8. And once you have 8 blocks in place, then it's core symmetry, and then it starts jumping up in increments of 16, only in the frame though. It's only the frame that grows by 16 per thing, because the actual structure, because what happens if you were to look at this as solid blocks, solid cubes, once you get that 8, the next evolution is 64. So you're seeing in the 5th evolution, not counting 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 5th evolution of the 3D cube gives you 64 blocks. So again, we're seeing the magic of 5. And now, with this structure here, now all the numbers that I showed on the video presentation for this and its hexagonal presentation all still apply. There's so much going on with the numbers. But you could look at this 4 and 5 that is in the dead center here as sort of like a key. If you were to turn this like a key, the 4 would combine with the 3 to give you 7, and the 6 would combine with the 5 to reduce to a 2 ultimately. So that would give you a 7-2 presentation, and you're turning it in its polarized way. If you turn it the opposite way and put the 5 to the 3, it would give you 8, and the 6 to the 4 would ultimately give you a 1, and it would give you an 81 presentation. So this is like a key. In this way, if you turn it that way for 81, it's non-polarized. If you turn it this way for 72, it is polarized. Okay? And we're jumping into higher geometry here. This is getting into the realm of guys like Dan Winter, who I don't even pretend to be on a par with right now, because that guy knows, Dan Winter presentations are dealing with higher science and higher geometry than I'm currently at. But if you look at this presentation here, it's obviously 2 pentagons, but now we're seeing the presentation, this could either be, if you see it in its, if you were to look at this flat or even inverted, it would be presented as a dodecahedron, which has 12 faces. If you were to look at this as a 3D raised bump, it would take the presentation of an icosahedron, which is 20 faces. And then when you add 12 and 20, that gives you 32, and that, of course, reduces to a 5. So this structure, all of these structures are showing the icosahedron and the dodecahedron in their presentations. And according to Dan Winter, all of the largest structures in the universe are dodecahedral, including DNA. As a matter of fact, atomic structure is very important in this, because if you look at the structure of chemical structures, like anything, a lot of them start out with a hexagonal and a pentagonal core. DMT does it, psilocybin does it, DNA does it, all the components of DNA, the 4 components of DNA do it. They all start out with a hexagonal core, and then it'll be attached with a pentagon, and then it'll branch off doing a bunch of other shit, and then it will form its chemical structure that way. But the root of a lot of them are hexagons and pentagons. But now getting to that, this is a very important thing, because this is dealing with, this image here is dealing with, this is a atom here. This is an atom, and this is showing 18 electrons, because the science, the world of science, even conventional, I'm using conventional science here as the template, but the single-digit code is all over that, because the periodic table of elements has 18 rows. From beginning, it starts out with hydrogen, and then the other end is helium, and there's 18 rows that go across. Okay, in the structure of the atoms here, it deals with the nucleus, of course, protons and neutrons. But the first ring will have 2 electrons. Okay, and it will only have 2 electrons. And then the rings after that will start out with 8 rings, and then grow to 8 rings. And they have a thing that's called a valence shell, okay? And that's how the periodic table is organized. So, in smaller elements like hydrogen, there's only 1 electron, there's only 1 proton, and then there's only 1 electron to go with it. And this starts out the whole thing, so that would only have 1 electron in its valence shell. Helium is on the other end, and that's noble gas. It means it doesn't mix with anything because its valence shell is full. And this is on the very opposite end. This is the first one. This is the first element, and this is the second element, helium. This is the first noble gas. And its valence shell has 2 electrons, and that fills its valence shell because it only has room for 2 because it's so small. So its valence shell is full. The rest of the noble gases have 8 electrons in its valence shell. Now you could have all 18, like in this case, this atom here has 18 electrons, but when it deals with valence shell, the only ones that matter in its location on the periodic table are the 8 elements, the 8 electrons in its valence shell. Okay, so that's how the periodic table is organized, so its valence shell. It doesn't matter how many internal electrons it has, they go by the valence shell. And the valence shell determines whether it wants to join with other elements or not. In the case of this element, whichever this would be, this would not want to join with anything else. This would be a noble gas of some type because its valence shell is full, so it wouldn't want to bond with anything. But if this had 1 or 2 or even 3 electrons missing, this element would want to bond with other elements to become complete and whole. So, example being, if this outer ring was missing an electron, hydrogen would want to come over and bond with that to fill the space, and that would form a bond. And that would show an atom here. This little figure 8 pattern is like, you see, on this structure, on these structures, they look a lot like what goes on with chemical structures. See, how they show it is, using the 0, 1 here as an example, you got the 0 for one atom, you got the 1 for another atom. And this line, this connecting line, doesn't exist. That line doesn't exist, okay? But what that line is telling you is that this atom and this atom are joined by electrons. They're either sharing an electron in the case of a covalent bond, or one of these atoms stole an electron in the case of an ionic bond. Okay, but I'll use the covalent bond for the rest of my discussion, just because it shows what's going on. So if they're sharing electrons, this line doesn't exist. So what happens is these two atoms are held together because their electron pairs are keeping them together through their orbit. Now, this is just my speculation of what really goes on, but it looks like the electrons would go in a figure-8 pattern to keep the atoms together, you know what I mean? Because they're sharing those two electrons, because electrons aren't static. As a matter of fact, this could all be BS too, because I'm still not convinced that quackademia even knows what an electron is. That could just be fucking pure speculation, because I'm not even convinced that they've actually ever seen an electron. Honestly, they might not even know what the fucking electron is, because this isn't even an accurate structure. You know, the electron cloud is just this fucking cloud of swirling shit, but they might not even have, you know, they might not even know what an electron is, truthfully. But I'm just using this, I'm using conventional science. But getting back to hydrogen and helium, on the periodic table, there's a lot of interesting things that are happening here. It starts out, number one is hydrogen, okay? And now on the periodic table, you're going to notice there's sort of like two little mountainous ridges on it, okay? And there's 5 elements in this group, okay? There's 5 elements in this group over here, and all of the numbers, when you add up all the elements, form 31, which reduces to a 4. So we're seeing a 5-4 presentation over here. And then when you go to helium, it's the exact opposite. There's 13 elements in that group, which reduces to a 4. But if you add all the numbers of the elements, it adds to 140, which reduces to a 5. So in this, we're seeing a 5-4 and a 4-5 presentation with the two fucking elements that top the periodic table, hydrogen and helium. And the atomic mass number of hydrogen is 1.008, which gives you a 9. And the atomic mass of helium is 4.003, which gives you a 7. Okay, so this is the two ends of the spectrum. There's a lot more with the periodic table and the single digit code. This is only the beginning, I think, because there's a lot to go. But again, you know, the periodic table in conventional quackademia, I'm not convinced that's accurate. As a matter of fact, I like Walter Russell's periodic table better. Well, Walter Russell's periodic table is really good. You got to check that out. But I'm just going through convention right now. But now, okay, now to expound on the 5 aspects some more. Now, if I had known about this right away, this would have changed the course of this video, because I sat on this for a long time because I wasn't sure where to go with it. I sat on this, like the main structures here, for like a week because I didn't know where I was going to go with the presentation. And last night I saw this. This is a pentagram with a star in the middle. Okay. Now the angular degrees within this star, the 3 of them are the top of the star, the internal angle is 36 degrees. The lower portion angle in the star is 72 degrees, and the sections in the middle here in the pentagram are 108 degrees. Now this is screaming single digit code. This is 36 as the root, 72, you know, we've already gone over that, and 108 is, you know, the Hindu number 108. So this is fucking huge with the single digit code and the pentagram. Okay? This is amazing. And then when you start adding, like each little star shape is going to have 2 72s and 136. When you add that up, it gives you 180, which is half a circle and all that. So we're dealing with a lot here. And we're dealing with a lot here. And we're dealing with a lot in all of this. And it's very important with the nature of 5. So this is the redemption of the number 5. 5 and phi in the phi ratio. As we know, Fibonacci and the phi ratio are linked very, very closely. There might be a difference between Fibonacci and the actual wave of phi, but it corrects itself. Even that has a fluctuation. Like the phi ratio and then the Fibonacci operate in a pulsing wave too. Everything operates in a pulsing wave. And this is shown that. But this is the redemption of 5. And we're getting into a little bit of hard science. We're getting into a lot of hard science because we're getting into geometry. We're getting into higher geometry with the dodecahedron, which is 12, and the icosahedron, which is 20. And we're seeing all these structures here. We're seeing the cube, the relationship, and all of this. But it's showing the irony of that calling the jewel of creation a tree is actually the best name for it. But see, again, what the Kabbalists did is, the Kabbalists mixed everything up so badly that you would never know what the truth is unless you examined it like I have. Because calling this a tree is more accurate than calling it anything else, but they're assigning the properties of the root here of what I call the true tree of life. They're assigning the properties of this to this when it's not. That's why I say the Kabbalistic tree of life is literally a symbol for materialism and atheism / Satanism. The Kabbalistic tree of life is a symbol for atheism and Satanism. It's exactly what it is, because it's putting the material world in the position of Godhead. It's the material world is Yahweh. In the tree of life, they're calling it Yahweh. And they sort of even hint to it in their presentation, because they have above what they call Kether, they have Ayin Sof, Ayin Sof, and Ayin Sof Hour, which coincidentally is 3 levels. Really what they call Ayin Sof, and Ayin Sof Hour is the true tree of life, because that's 3 worlds. You got the world of water, the world of fire, and the world of air. 1, 2, 3, and that forms this, and they all work together as one. This is going to be a little splice into this video. So if you're seeing this, I was successful, because I have to edit these videos, because this is long. But there's one point I wanted to get to that I forgot to get to. As I was coming up with this video, there's an image that presented itself, I saw on the internet, and it's this. Okay? You see that? That has the pillars of Boaz and Yakin, and they're being pulled into each other. And there's a lion there with a unicorn horn on it. Well, if you see in the middle on the lion's chest, there is the pentagram, okay? And that's obviously 5. But if you look at where the horn of the lion is pointing, it's pointing to the house of Leo, which is the 5th house on the zodiac. And with him pulling in those pillars, it's pulling them in as if the pillars were being pulled in to form the pentagon shapes of this structure. So that's very important. I wanted to add that and show the image of it. I saw this image like a day or so after I was starting to work on this, and I made comments on it in some places, but I wanted to add that in this video. So thank you, and namaste.